mai, hore mai, noa mga fuax, everybody. Welcome to the FAQ podcast, where we invite people like yourself from all walks of life to converse about various access to equity within the context of Aotearoa. We invite guests to share their lived experience in an effort to identify common threads within support systems, social networks, and knowledge that uplifts the collective human experience. Kelsey.
Hi.
What's our FAQ question season 1?
What does equity and support look like for various communities coexisting within one society? I feel like I shouldn't need to read that by now. I should just know.
I mean, welcome to the new you.
I know. New year, new me.
Trash. Trash. But today we have I feel like you should
Let's let them introduce themselves.
Let's do that. Let's do that. Please tell us your pronouns, who you are in your own definition, and finish the sentence, I am.
Way, Papa Lord, way, Papa Lord, in your Lord. Your Lord, Papa Lord, incluke in our in your Lord, Papa Lord, way, Papa Lord, way, Papa Lord, in your Lord. Your Lord, Papa Lord, incluke in our in your Lord, Papa Lord, way, Papa Lord, way, Papa Lord, in your Lord. Your Lord, Papa Lord. Tēnā koutou katoa. So I was raised along the west coast of Turtle Island, between Tongva territories and Duwapsh territories, Coast Salish territories. So what is now known as Los Angeles and Seattle over in the U.S. And grown up along the Pacific Ocean, which is definitely my big parent. And yeah, my peoples are from Cebu in the archipelago, what is known as the Philippines now. And the borderlands between U.S. and Mexico. So that fictitious border there, kind of around New Mexico area and northern Mexico. That's also where my peoples are from. Probably lots of unknown conquistador blood. Other ancestors I don't know. And my mother is Vivian Luna. My father is Luna-Pizano. And therefore I am Rafaela Lucia Luna-Pizano. In English, my pronouns are he and him. But yeah, I love our indigenous languages because a lot of us don't have pronouns. Right? It's ia or sia. Yeah.
Do you want to touch base on that a little bit? Because I feel like that's something that's already like a point of tension for a lot of people who don't understand
pronouns.
Yeah, that's outside of English terms.
Yeah, like that just makes me think of my Lola because she calls everybody she. Just everybody when she's speaking in English, right? So in Tagalog we don't have gendered pronouns either. It's just like one word that would refer to that person. I'm still learning Tagalog again.
Yes.
And Ilocano, Cebuano, Visayan, all the dialects on my mom's side. So in English, when she meets my friends, I always have to warn them because some of them, are also trans and have been figuring out and coming forward with how people can address them in a respectful way. And so they're coming to visit my Lola, and I'm like, hey, just a heads up. She's probably not going to get your pronouns because everyone is she in her world. Like my Lolo is she, my uncles are she, my dad is she. So like, and I don't even, I'm pretty sure they all go by he and him. So yeah, just, I'm sorry ahead of time. We'll work on it. But I love it because, when it translates through, it doesn't always work out. Yeah, for me, pronouns, it just depends where I've been at in my journey. When I was younger, pronouns were definitely a lot more precious for me. And then as I'm older, there's just so many more things I have to worry about that I'm just like, I can't be fucked with that right now. Like, you're always gonna fuck up my pronouns, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't. So I hope that like the people around me who know my pronouns will just at least be like, oh hey, yeah, it's he and him, whatever. But for others, yeah, I mean, it can really make or break your day sometimes, So I think it is still a very important piece, but it's just a way to respectfully interact with someone, right? So whenever someone's mispronouncing me, I'll just start mispronouncing them back. If they're a cis person, if I can read that they're cis, or I'll just call them by the wrong name like over and over, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm like, well, this is what you're doing to me. This is how it feels, Yeah. Yeah. I did see a meme where someone's like, just do an air horn at them every time. I was like, well, I'll be deaf. Yeah. So funny. But yeah, I don't know. Pronouns to me are just like names, but they also don't indicate more than that to me. So I've definitely been in spaces where we're like, okay, everyone, like, as you introduce yourselves, can you just offer your pronouns? For me, I always say if you feel comfortable, because sometimes pronouns are, that's a really vulnerable space. Someone might still be figuring it out, and they're like, holy shit, am I going to share right now my pronoun? I don't know, so I'm like, it's all good. Like, whatever you can share. Otherwise, I'll just call you by your name, but some folks will be like, oh, I go by female pronouns or male pronouns. I'm like, all right, sweet. So male pronouns is bag is over there. Can you let male pronouns go get that? I'll just use male pronouns as their pronoun. Because I'm like, that's not telling me anything. Like a pronoun won't tell me your gender, actually. And I mean, already it's in English. It's a colonizing language. Like, we didn't even have all this shit, like all these fucking gender constructs. You know what I mean? They're all part of a colonizing practice. So, I'm kind of like, I get really excited when people can offer in their native tongues or the tongues that feel most comfortable to them, which could be not a spoken one either, right? Could be movement. Could be other sounds. Like, it's always great to find other ways to refer to people. So, yeah. Pronoun rant.
That hit so much.
That made me think about like sign language. Is that ever something that you've jumped into? As like another way of communicating without like spoken language?
No, I've always been interested in sign language because I am a really visual person. So I'm really happy when I'm around community that is communicating in that way. But I try not to watch too much because I know that'd be like eavesdropping, But yeah, I have had some family members who are been learning and trying to get more fluent, at least in ASL, right? Because just like all of our languages, there's different dialects. But I do appreciate just embodied language. So I'm a mover for sure. I love to move. And so communicating through my movement, to me, is a sign that I'm alive, for one. Because before coming into movement, I really didn't want to be here. You know what I mean? So I think, movement is kind of what helped. It's what helps keep me alive and in this plane. Yeah. So I appreciate any kind of embodied language.
Love. And I've seen you do a lot of movements as well. And your last art, what do you even call it? A ceremony for me? Or,
I called it a ceremony.
Because I had the nerve to be like, is it an exhibition or is it? And I'm like, no, it's a ceremony. The last time you went there, like, did you want to talk about that a little? But in terms of what that meant to you and what that actually was?
Dang it, Joe.
Well, you're talking about movement, so I feel like the move, like, that was.
Yeah, I still haven't processed that whole ceremony. Like, it was so much. So it was, we called it Indak Kani Kani, and both those words being from Tagalog and then from Reo Maori, and meaning like to move or to dance, but kind of in like a uplifted, like spirited way. And what was crack up is that when we actually got the ceremony going, it seemed so much about sound, actually, for me, and all kinds of sound, and especially vocal. But that's to me, that's a different kind of dance and a different kind of movement. It's still coming from all of your body. But that ceremony initially, I wanted to gather up a few other Indigenous folks who were in the spectrum of transness. So we have so many different words around shifting gender or shifting embodiment in our respective traditions as Indigenous folks. So it's always kind of hard to find the language around it. So I just kind of use trans as a big old umbrella that a lot of folks can kind of grab onto, but it's still just a placeholder for me. So gathering up other trans Indigenous artists to move with me and then try to create a free flow space where I was really just trying to explore liminality, the in-between space. Because that's just where I am all the time. But not only explore it, but see what ancestral knowledge is there for us. So I feel like...
what was the word that you used? Sorry?
Liminality. Liminal, so to be between, like in the doorway. Yeah, like I feel like there's so much that can fall between, right? In the gaps. There's so much... it's that space between folks when we're connecting. There's all that rich exchange there. It's that I see it as time. Also, it's not just a place. I see it as a movement. Yeah, because I feel like I'm liminal, so I'm always constantly shifting and adjusting to where I am. I mean, everyone is really, or, if you're made of any kind of water, you are. Right? So I'm always going back to the elements and how the elements teach us about liminality. Yeah.
Is that similar to the concept of Va?
Yeah. I'm still learning about Va.
Yeah, well, I just jumped into it, and I only read probably 3 different articles on it, but it very much like, well, my basic understanding is it's the space between understanding, and it's the space between a lot of different things. So it's like connecting, and I'm like, when you're talking about it, I'm like, whew. Yeah. I feel like there could be a correlation there.
Yeah. No, it's that. It's also the unknown. So that's why I also like it so much, because I'm nothing to me is ever very conclusive. I feel like there's always so much unknown, and more beyond, and more to understand that we may never get to, and also surrendering to that, and how important that is.
You're so rude. You're just exposing.
Same. I feel like I'm being called out right now.
Shh, hold space. You got this. You're doing great. But we're just acknowledging that. Wow, that's amazing. Like, I'm glad that you can articulate that, because I feel like I'm still struggling to articulate what that feels like, or that is for me. So I'm really appreciative that you can actually speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, not that I'd want to know everything anyways, right? It's too much for this little body. But, there's a lot of fear in the unknown, right? Which is why so much, I feel like there's so much violence perpetrated against each other, because we don't know each other. We don't understand. So when you see something that's unknown, just have to shield up. But then how you move through the unknown in a way that you can still stay connected to yourself and your medicines, like your ancestors. So that hopefully if you do connect with a bit more of that unknown, you can do it in a good way, or in a way that's, I don't know what I'm talking about now, but I'm seeing some strange.
Really
Like, where am I going?
Misunderstanding coming into like shielding up and then resulting sometimes in violence.
Yeah.
I think that goes all the way back to colonization.
Yeah.
Of being, oh, we don't know what that is, but it's not ours, so we think it's wrong. And we're going to fight you, even though we came here.
Yeah.
Talking about the white people. By the way.
Yeah.
Just if you didn't catch that. We're just going to take it. Because we can.
Yeah, or that you don't fit, our tradition, so we have to make you fit that so that we know and understand what, where we are.
And what we can expect from you.
In a way, I see that as a job as well, in job interviews. Like, as an analogy, I feel like it's like, oh, you don't fit our mold, and our mold is this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that every job needs to fit every mold, but I'm like, just a little consideration would be nice. Just a little.
Do you maybe want to think about that other stuff that I'm bringing that you're not asking for, but it's actually going to be beneficial to your company?
And is one interview going to bring that out? Of that understanding? It could, if done right, but I feel like one interview.
Don't get me started on capitalism.
That's a whole other episode.
Okay, yes.
Capitalism's not for humans, so.
So your ceremony.
Yeah.
I was blessed enough to witness that.
Yeah. Wait, which night did you come to
with
again?
Joe.
The first night.
The first night. Okay, you're there on the first.
I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely evolved over time,
Yeah.
and that was the point. So I did it over the course of, or not me, we. So I was working with 3 other artists. And a 4th actually who came in and then left right before, kind of 2 weeks up to. So there are definitely people who came in and then left and then came in again at the end, so, and then who knows what other energies were always coming through and working with us and, messing with us. And then setting us back on. Yeah. So, lots of energies come through. But yeah, 3 other human artists. And I wanted to do it over, I like durational pieces. Oh my God, that's such a white word. Wow. So it's just ceremony. Ceremony takes time, Some of our ceremonies take days and days and nights and nights. Some, just the afternoon or just the morning, right? But this one, I was really curious about what would happen during the liminal times. But I guess any time really is liminal because there's no split. There's no clear day. Like there's always a little bit of night approaching or a little bit of day approaching, right? That's something that Leanne Simpson, who's an Indigenous scholar from back home, she reminded me of that.
Beautiful.
And so, but I'm still interested in like sunset and sunrise. There's the most clear in between times to us, and I feel like I'm always obsessed with those times, mostly because of the color palette. Yes. I'm a neon pastel bitch. Definitely a pastel goth. And I really love the morning star, who's also known as the evening star. So I love that they can change. And a lot of in some Indigenous traditions that I've been around, I can see, like Western, or I'd say it's not even just Western, but our colonial understanding is that it's a planet, it's Venus, right? But they actually have different personalities, like at different times. And so there's been different energies or deities that are associated with the morning star and then the evening star. And yet they're still the same entity, the same being. And so I'm like, you're so trans. So I love them. I love them. And that's also why I like those times of day-night, because that's when they're the most clear. So they're heralding that transition, and they're like, everybody, it's coming. Get ready. And they're personified in lots of different ways by our traditions too. So to me, I was interested in those times of the day and night. So I was like, okay, I want this ceremony to be over a few days so that I can see what's happening during those times. We may not be in the gallery like with people at those times. We usually we're at sunset, not sunrise, unfortunately. But yeah, like, is there an energy? Like, what happens at that time? How do people shift and change? I'm just always so interested to see how we reflect the cosmos and like what the elements are doing. So that's why I did it over a few days. But it was about gathering knowledge through ritual. Gathering the knowledge that trans people hold in our bodies as also Indigenous people. So I feel like because of colonial practices and all of the ways that genocide works. Trans folks have been separated out from our Indigenous communities, just like all the genders have been separated out and made genders even, right? And then assigned different roles. And our role was to not exist, actually, right? Because we challenged everything. And often because we held so much knowledge, especially ceremonially, in terms of our practices, that keep us in sync with our ways, right? Like the cultural bearers. So you got to take those people out first when you're colonizing so that you can break the spirit and then, you know, put in your chunk, right? Refuse and then keep going your agenda, right? As a colonizer. So, so I feel like at least in the Philippines, a lot of our traditional healers, leaders of ceremony, and the folks who kind of helped guide community, right? Whether it was around harvest or how you do different practices that keep the community going. Those people were often fluid around gender and presentation and in body, probably because they're constantly in that in-between realm, right? How can you not? That's just what you are, who you are. It's what you do. And so we were... we were one of the first to be killed first, right? Fed to the crocodiles, like fed back to our ancestors, actually. Our kaitiaki, our guardians. Such a trip. And so I feel like because we were some of the first that were erased in terms of how Indigenous knowledges were being broken down and taken away from us and separated from our lands, I feel like a lot of Indigenous folks still have a hard time recognizing transness and all of these fluid ways of being as actually an Indigenous practice. Because it's one of the first things that was wiped as we were broken away from our lands and our waters. So it's almost like, so, you know, like as we're fighting for, like whether it's the rights of Indigenous women or men or young children or our elders, somehow you know, like trans folks, two-spirited folks, you know, queer Indigenous folks are kind of on the wayside still somehow. And I don't know why. And there's slowly, you know, more and more we see, especially today, like it's definitely changed a lot. And we're more and more woven in the space and we're doing the thing. But it's always,
Christianity did its thing.
I mean, you know, it just still blows my mind how transphobia and homophobia is still so alive and well in our Indigenous spaces. And it's like, I don't care if you can say, oh, no, but, you know, I always love you. You're my brother. You're my sister. Just tell me what you want. And it's all good. It's like, sure. But then if you turn around and you still make some homophobic remark on the side to your bros, your real bros, you know what I mean? How is that? You know, like, there's just so many ways it still is seeping through everything we do. Or if you're too afraid to look femme in this moment, you know what I mean? Because it makes you look gay. And I'm like, and that's what? A great thing, right? Like, or
like that whole like no homo crap that was happening a couple of years ago. It was all like all around. I was like, what's the problem? And I even get that. Like I have some Vans from the Pride collection, and people are like, oh, they're so cool. I would never wear them. People think I'm gay. I'm like, what's the problem? I'm like, just because I got a little rainbow on the side of them. Yeah. But they're like, they're so cool. I'm like, you can get them here.
Yeah.
They're like, no, I won't wear them. People think I'm gay.
Is that like performative allyship? Because I feel like that's so cool for you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I love that for you.
You know, it can run the line of appropriation though, right? Because also, so we're like, where I come from, like, so like you don't know who's gay or straight because everybody's just doing everything, which is great. Because I'm like, everyone's gay in my world. Everyone's gay. So, because to be Indigenous to me is to also be queer, because our forms of sexuality and our gender are before all this colonial bullshit. And so, you know, people say, oh, well, there was no, you know, ancient word for gay people or queer. Well, there's no ancient word for straight people either, right? That's what one of my supervisors would always say.
There literally wasn't.
And so, you know, it's like all these different separations. Like, that's just not, it's not our value. It's not our way. Granted, now we live where we live now, you know, and so many things have happened. So, you know, I think that's also why it's hard to rep transness in Indigenous space, because in a way, it's almost making me try to be like, well, I'm an individual. Look at me. Look, I'm this, right? And everyone's like, that's not how we do it. Like, you need to, we're still rehabbing you. You collective work, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, right. Like, try to blend. Why can't I blend? Oh, because y'all are still afraid of me. Why are you afraid of me? Oh, because I'm actually doing it the way our ancestors did it. We didn't do this men's bathroom over there, women's, but we just went in the bush. Like, what is this shit? Why are we doing? Oh, sure. I think we did have different roles according to what our bodies were doing. But again, that was still something that each body determined. Like, each body has their own sovereignty, which is part of the collective sovereignty. And if they're not allowed to assert that, then they can't actually, they're not going to be fully here, right? So in the context of a colonial space now, having to assert ourselves as trans folks in Indigenous space just to keep rehabbing everyone else, it's like transness is part of our practice. That fluid movement in space is part of our practice. You already know that. Why is it so scary though when my body's doing it day in, day out in this way, And we know it's all that deeply embedded stuff, right? Because it's a proximity to whiteness or to colonial space. Like, how much more can we seem like them? Can we seem normal to then get what we need, right? And it's like, I don't have a choice. There's no way I'm going to be anywhere near that. Like, I'm brown, I'm trans, I'm queer as fuck.
Yeah.
I'm kinky, I'm all these fucking things. You know what I mean? And I am that way out and loud because to me, those are all the different Indigenous practices that have now been,
raised.
So,
but not lost.
Yeah, no, it's clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't get me started. But we have different language for it now, whereas maybe our ancestors didn't have to name it all because it wasn't.
Because that wasn't a big
deal.
They had bigger shit to push out.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, we can have enough food.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is still the reality, obviously, for many folks today. So again, these are very privileged conversations, right?
For sure.
Always. Yeah, definitely. So, I think of my trans sisters and brothers who are incarcerated, and like, pronouns may not really be a big deal right now to them, Yeah. So, because they're just trying to survive day to day without their hormones, you know what I mean? Without access to the things they had before. So it's a whole other, they're just trying to stay alive. And it's the same for us on the outside too, though. We're just trying to stay alive. So that ceremony, going back to it for me, was also praying for the health and life of trans people, especially Indigenous trans folks. Really, it's for all trans people, always. So, yeah, there was a beautiful altar that started to bloom over the next 3 days because people were bringing more stuff to it. And yeah, someone brought a T-shirt, and I'm forgetting the name of the artist in the gallery that it came from right now, and it has all of our, a bunch of our different names for like gender fluid, gender sacred peoples, from different Indigenous spaces from throughout the Pacific, Turtle Island, mostly those areas. And I was just like, whoa. It was just so nice to see our language. Cause yeah, like LGBTQIA plus and all of that, like that's great, but it doesn't really, it doesn't necessarily communicate across.
No, that is just for the white people.
Yeah. And, and I know I'll use them when I can, when I definitely still come from dyke spaces, like to me, that's a very political space to me. Like I don't say lesbian, I know that I come from trans masculine spaces, even though I'm read a lot as a trans woman, which I feel very honored, but I can't claim that, yeah. And then like two-spirit is another term that's used a lot in Turtle Island by First Nation folks, but, it's still particular to certain folks. There's so many, so yeah, I kind of, but queer, I definitely, I'll rep that. But it's funny because I remember I met someone here who's Takatapui, and they were like, yeah, I don't call myself queer. And I'm like, oh yeah, tell me more. And they're like, well, because queer is like, it's like weird, right? It's like separate outside of, it's different, right, than the norm. And they're like, foremost, I'm Maori, which is to be, actually it means ordinary in my language. And so like, I'm the same, I'm of everyone. And like Takatapui is not strange or weird or different. Like it is part of our norm. And I was like, oh, word. I'm like, okay, that's dope. Like I was like,
hard.
But for me, like I use queer because I come from a space where our norm is fucked up. Like in the US, it's fucked. And I don't want to be part of that norm.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it looks all really great over here. I think I'd like to move to America, particularly now.
Fucking hell. Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry, the shirt's coming off,
Yes,
you guys. It's too
go.
loud. Yeah, so
See, that's what America does to them. Shit's off.
Yeah. And you know, we are yeah. Now I'm just thinking about all my family. They're doing their best, you know, to resist and to continue to stay in their ceremonies and to just to bear down through that storm right now, through that shift, right? The rebirth that's happening. Which is really messy. It's gonna be just keep getting messier. So, you know, holding tight to our ceremonies, however they come through. And that's a hard thing though, you know, when you're born away from the land of your ancestors or you were taken away from that land before you could remember. So, you know, Joe, your question about what communities do you belong to? I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. We haven't even jumped them there yet.
Yeah, you know, I'm like,
But everything else has been actually really juicy and just really fruitful for me anyways, because I feel like I've learned so much and I'm also being challenged by your korero, because I feel like even for me, queer, I like the fact that I'm different because I guess in a way I don't want to be normal. Like you laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because you're the same.
Yeah, how boring.
Do you know what I mean? Like I'm like, and that's a quote from somebody else. I don't know who that person was, but I just feel like you're so right, like right on the money when you're saying, you know, different worldviews around what queer is. We need to entertain them at least. And I feel like what that person shared with you, I'd never even heard that korero before. It's
beautiful. And to me, that shows me like how important it is to continue to find our Indigenous spaces again in community. But it's also not to romanticize and say that once we find our peeps, you know, get back to the village, that they will welcome you back, you know, if they still exist, okay? Because my grandma's was bombed, so it's like nowhere to go back to. But yeah, it's because there's unfortunately the different forms of phobias have been sown, right? Colonization has touched everywhere. So, I mean, or it could be because, you know, we look or we're acting in ways that to them that's really that comes from the colonizer, right? It is hard to rep queerness and transness in Indigenous space because I have seen some elders kind of look at it as like a white disease, right? To be that way, you know, oh, because you went to the city and you came back like this, right? And it's hard to kind of suss that all out and reconcile. And I'm like, okay, sure. So some of the ways I am are because I'm a product of, I've been raised in a really colonial way in space because I was born in cities, like I was raised in cities. You know, just kind of reconciling with that and still knowing that at the end of the day, though, whatever I'm bringing through in terms of my energy and my dedication to reconnecting with my ancestors or just not even reconnecting, but just being them, however it manifests. I mean, I'm still here and I'm still doing that. And if it looks this way, which is, you know, a really trans way, a really faggy way, you know, whatever way, okay, you know, it's another expression of my ancestors. It's today's expression. I don't know. And it might be hard when that meets with
tradition.
Whatever that means, you know. And tradition, you know, is a really live and breathing being to me.
Thank you.
And always shifting and changing, because how would we stay alive as Indigenous folks if we didn't adapt and shift and move, right? While maintaining the essence of those teachings. I think that's what people are always afraid of when shifting tradition. Well, we're going to lose the essence. And I'm always like, you are the essence. You are the essence. Our elements are all around us. They're not changing. Like the oceans and the mountains are so much older than us and bigger. They are the essence, you know, as long as you can stay with them. you know, so what if I'm not wearing a skirt right now? It's gonna be okay. And also we learn, right? Okay, so maybe doing it that way didn't work out. Change it again. Like, you can keep adjusting it. It's not, you know, once you shift it doesn't mean you can't shift it again. That, you know, change is scary because, again, the unknown is on the other side, right? Yeah.
How did that land for you, Joe?
Why did you come for me?
Because I can see your reaction.
I'm like, no, because to me, I'm like, I've been having conversations around tradition for myself with who I am and what I want in my own worldview.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, I feel like in my lived experience within my culture, tradition has been such a limiting factor to growth or to understanding or to relationality and to connection. Tradition has been absorbed over time, and it's been like discoursed over time, and the fact that we still don't have conversations about that, for me, it's kind of like, I was just telling you last night, those, like, when I think about tradition, I almost want to ask my grandma, like, are you going to step up and talk about this now? And because she's not here anymore, I'm like, okay, well, does that mean that I need to step up and talk about this? But what does it look like? Because I feel like that's where you come into my worldview, and you're like, what does a mana enhancing conversation look like about tradition that uplifts everybody involved in that? And for me, I'm still balancing that out, and I still, like, obviously have a lot of healing to do around Christianity and church and how they discourse and still continue to discourse a lot of my people's worldview, but that's also not my journey. And if they don't want to wake up to that, I feel like I have to let them flow on their own journey, because their journey could actually mean so much more, or it could highlight so much more at the end of their path, wherever that leads. Whereas for me, I think I was focusing my energy fully on being like, almost the reverse effect of colonialism, of being like, how do I save my own people? You know what I mean? Like, those are the conversations where I'm like, whew. That's why I'm really leaning into the va and the what was the word again?
Liminal. But I like va so much better.
But I guess for me, it's just entertaining both sides of the coin, right? And that's why I feel like this is such an important korero, because we all are there, and it's really black and white to me, that I'm like, it took thousands of years for me to exist. My ancestors, everything. If we look at evolutionary biology, it took thousands of years for me to exist. So I'm like, I can't really. Yeah, I feel like for me, if I'm to understand it, it took the world ages to create me, and I exist between that and now. What does that even mean? Like, I'm like, I love the fact that we can rely, and the word that hit me the most for when you spoke is surrender. And I'm like, I'm not surrendering, I'm fighting. Being like, oh my God, no, my past told me this, so I need to rely on this. And I'm like, it's the surrender for me. So thank you for that. Actually, I think I'm hearing loud and clear that surrender is in the works. But yeah, what did you thought?
I was wrapped up in your reaction. Sorry, I was like, yes. Joe looks like he's about to cry. No, I like that. Like,
I basically did just cry.
Yeah, I'm coming from a very like white perspective, and I am interested in how I can be of service to an Indigenous trans community, while also honouring my own journey, because I am amidst a gender journey myself, and figuring out what that looks like in my world and in my worldview, with my very white whānau. And I think I've got hurdles that I need to jump through as well, but they're different, but they're similar. And I think that some of the experiences that I'm having would be similar to maybe some of the experiences you're having, but in really different spaces. So how can we come together to support all people through gender experiences, but while also honouring their own like pre-lived experiences and not discounting like Indigenous spaces and places and ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. So your ceremony that I was blessed to be witness, loved it so much.
It challenged, straight away, it just challenged me to just, like, I specifically remember, like, the voices telling me to close your eyes because you were being judgmental. Now, I specifically heard that korero loud and clear because I'm like, I got to a point where I was like, oh, okay, this is like, I walked in and I'm like, this is really performative. Yes, I like this. It's so Indigenous. I'm so, like, look at me. I'm so Indigenous. And then when I sat down and everything started like blossoming, this is me, I don't know if I like this. And like, I heard like little voices saying like, this is really not the normal. This is weird. This is not who like what you would normally look at. Joe, what are you seeing in front of you? And that's when I heard the voices really loud being like, shut your eyes. And when I closed my eyes, the smells took me places, the voices, and like, I'm glad that you talked about like sound for it, and it was the sounds took me places. And I'm like, as soon as I started to really embrace that, and I guess surrender of sorts, a lot of different things were like, I was between the beginning and the end, in that between space, there was so like, I feel like I need to reflect on that space because you've actually challenged me in that space to be like, what was happening for you? And I felt so at disarray with my normal routine on purpose.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. But yes.
My goal in life is to make everyone uncomfortable. Let's be clear.
Well, you fucked me over in all the right ways.
God. That comes from that queerness, I guess. Well, just backtracking real quick though, when you were talking about tradition, and you were speaking about your experiences around tradition kind of blocking or like, I don't know what the word is that you use, but just holding you back. Yeah. And that's when I thought of, I don't remember, maybe I read it or someone said it to me, but just probably someone said it to me, or probably Maori relatives here, reminding me that, you know, if tradition is not allowing if it's actually holding back the growth of an individual and therefore the collective, like we need to really look at it again. And see if the tradition's not actually enhancing and supporting and nourishing life, then, you know, but then again, whose life, right? And so, you know, people might be like, oh, well, the majority though feels nourished. And it's like, you can't leave anybody behind. That's not how we work, not as Native folks. Because even if you try, you're going to feel us because, you know, we're all connected here and you'll feel us. Whether it's that we leave early, okay? Because suicide's a really big thing for trans community, you know, and queer community. Whether it's we leave early or because we don't actually fulfill whatever purposes we're here to do, right? Which is for the community. So it's all going to help the community, whatever that community is. So for me, it's not even about trying to, you know, make exceptions for these special peoples or like, you know, be accommodating or like whatever the fucking words they want to use. Like, oh my God, I'm accommodating you right now every day. But
don't stop.
You know?
Yeah, do not stop.
But yeah, you know, instead of that actually being yeah, just like how are we supporting someone to just be in their on path, right? Just to be on path, because that path will help everyone else. If we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing, oh my God, like, you know.
Can you just repeat that exact fucking things for the people in the back, please?
That we need to just be supporting each person to be on path, because if we're all fulfilling our purposes, whatever that path is, that's going to actually create the community. The issue is figuring out what the heck that purpose is if you have been born away from your traditions. In diaspora, which is always a contentious word in Indigenous space because...
Wait, is that how you say it? No, because I'm still
fucked up. The way I say it, I don't know.
Diaspora, but I'm like, am I just pronouncing every...
Diaspora.
Like,
but these people that just go diaspora, and I'm like this... What is it? I was like, I read it every single now
I
and
don't
then.
know.
And
I
I'm
have a huge
what is it?
accent.
And then I'm like, diaspora. Diaspora.
All I know is I think of spores, right? Because that's where it comes from. It's like that leaving, right? But for me, like if you're Indigenous and you're in diaspora or diaspora,
Diaspora. Anyway.
Can you be, right? Because you are your land and you are your waters. So how can you be away from them? That's something that another scholar, I don't have any of the names in my head right now, I'm so sorry. But another Indigenous scholar has really brought forward too that just really questioning that. Can you be in diaspora if you're Indigenous? So a lot of folks, you know, when they introduce themselves, they will say, I am my mountain and I am my river, my oceans. I am this particular whenua, this land. And so, you know, as you travel, then you always are there, right? And that idea is what has really helped ground me because I've been born away from the lands of my grandmother's mother, you know, on both sides. And so when I'm in Indigenous spaces, I'm like, fuck, can I even call myself Native? You know, like I don't. And again, this is how colonialism works. Thank you. Messes with your head, makes you have to, you know, because yeah, of course, there's always gonna be people trying to fight me saying, oh, you can't identify this way. You can't be that way. And I'm like, you can talk about identity all day. I don't actually care. What I do know is what I am. I don't even mess with the word identify because I'm not sure what that is. That's like putting something on and taking it off when I want. Is that what that is? Because I don't know. I'm just my body, and this body houses all of this energy and all of these fucking ancestors. So I am.
Which one you trying to evoke? Huh? Which one you finna evoke out of me?
It's really interesting because, like, in white Western queer spaces, it's always like, tell us, how do you identify? What are your pronouns? And until you brought that up, I'm like,
identities?
yeah, it's kind of like, what are you choosing to bring forward and show people?
Yeah, and it's usually an oppression race too, right? Like it's like, what are all the things that make me not privileged? Let me just put them all out there because, like, you know, I'm not that privileged either. But then, you know, of course, what happens? Oh, yes, but no, I'm settler colonizer and I'm all these. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Do you identify as a settler colonizer right now? Because I don't know what I'm going to do with you then. Like, can you please identify with what you're going to do about it, not the thing that keeps happening? Like, actually, do you know where you're from? Because I don't know where I'm from either. Do some work on that.
Yeah.
So earlier when you were talking about like how to be in service, right, to trans Indigenous folks, I was thinking like, well, just working with yourself foremost. I think that's often the biggest trip that I see with white folks who are wanting to step into allyship, which I don't even fuck with. I'm like, are you going to be an accomplice or are you going to be an ally? Because I don't know what allies do, but an accomplice would be actually willing to be right up here with me, and their body is just as vulnerable right now with me, you know? Because allyship only goes to a certain point and like, that's a little too much. Okay, guys, I'll see you over there. You know, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, no.
And we don't have a choice. You have a choice. So yeah, but for me, I just really want white folks to do the work with themselves first and with their fauna, and that can be a lifetime just right there. That is the lifetime, you know. And in terms of supporting others who are beyond a white space or white community, you know, still doing it just through relationship, right? And so not doing it in a performative way, but doing it because you are in relationship with different people from Indigenous space who are actually asking you to come in and do work with them, right? Instead of just going and trying to insert, right? Or to be like, I'm here. But just listening to when you're called in. Yeah, just listening to when you're called to come and do the thing. And then obviously, like all of us always have the responsibility to keep learning about where we are, you know, because a lot of us aren't living, you know, in our ancestors' lands anymore. So that's on everybody to keep doing that. And then how the ancestors, which I consider also elemental ancestors, not just human ones, how are we asking for permission to continue to be here with them in this particular place? And what are we doing as part of our responsibility to them, our exchange with them, you know, to honor that they're allowing us to keep living here. You know, I always think about that, like what a gift to be allowed to live wherever I'm living. Because they could kill me anytime, I know that.
Yeah.
or kick me out. So
the inner work for me is so slept on. Like if you don't do the inner work, it shows.
Yeah.
Because you're projecting, you're doing all of these things, and it's like in my head, I'm like, I didn't know that I was always doing the inner work because I've been having conversations with myself for ages, and not like in a Luna psyche way. It's just been like you just self-assess and talk to yourself and figure out what's happening in the conversations happening up here. And in a way, I feel like I'm not complete with the inner work. It's a continuous thing. Just because you start the inner work, it doesn't mean that you're like there's a completion stage where you're done. It's a continuous thing. And I feel like for me, I've started that journey, and it's been a hell of a ride. But at the same time, so many blessings have come out of it because I've been able to heal myself through my own experiences and through my own shame that I brought myself into. Like that accountability, especially if you don't do the inner work, you're not accountable for your own like diminishing value of self. Because it just doesn't work like that. Like you keep on blaming everyone else. You think that it's everyone else's fault. And I'm like, boo, if you were part of that problem, your ass got yourself there.
Yeah.
No one else did. Like, and I'm like, for me, it's been a huge, huge weight off my shoulder to try and know that I'm like, I've been excusing myself.
And I think also sometimes people blame or think that they are, English, think that they are only a result of their upbringing and don't have, and I'm like, you have a choice to either like continue doing what you were told to do or to choose to do and change your ways.
And it's the choices for me. I'm like, if you don't know that you chose that.
And especially when you have people of color and Indigenous folks coming to you being like, hey, this is not, you got to change this. And then they still ignore. I'm like, oh, man. So that's what I've stopped. I've just kind of stopped. Just said, nope. I just did what I could, and now I am done. Keep focusing back on Indigenous community, on trans folks, because that's actually what I want to spend my time doing. Keep refocusing the energy. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that internal work at the end of the day is also getting to know all of the beings that make up you, right? Because like you were saying earlier, you know, thousands of years have come to create this, and you have this awesome gesture, which I wish everyone could see. But I was thinking, right, and you're also composed of all of these different beings, right? And more than human beings, which are the ones that I'm always like, oh, where are you? Because I feel like I
haven't dived into there yet. I'm still trying to process the 25 generations of intelligence that I have. But carry on.
Yeah. And so connecting with our more than human ancestors, our elemental ancestors, that to me, those are our original teachers, right? Because they've existed before all of this. So when we can keep grounding into them, how they'll feed us those bits that we need to keep going through all this really hard work within the human community, right? But you're also talking about, just undoing. I was thinking about, well, yeah, there's been so many generations of a thing that has been done. And so it's not going to take just your lifetime to sort it out, especially like, right, for like white folks even, right? That's many generations of a thing. And so it's going to take many more generations to keep sorting that out. And so the work that you can do now for yourself and your family, and then how that passes into the next generation. So I'm always thinking about, gosh, how do we raise better white people? You know what I mean? Like, are people thinking about how they're raising white children? Nah, probably not. Like, we know how we have to raise brown kids to like be safe and navigate a white world. Yeah. But how are we raising the white kids to dismantle that fucking white world?
I don't even think
not be white kids anymore, you know?
Yeah.
I've never even heard that question.
Whiteness is, you know, everyone can host whiteness in lots of different ways, not just like because of your skin. So, you know, because again, it comes back to colonization, imperialism, capitalism, all the things.
Yeah, all the things.
So it's just, you know, it's a hard and scary thing to finally like start picking it up and breaking it apart. Because again, it's that unknown, and you're gonna lose a lot of people along the way. People aren't ready, but I'm ready. I'm fucking ready. And so many more of us are ready, actually, you know, because we're doing it. But I think we all feel a bit in isolation about it as we do it, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're the only one in the family who's like, nah, stop.
Yeah.
Be the black sheep, like for real. You be the black sheep.
I've started questioning one of my grandparents about some of the statements that they make.
Yeah.
And like, to her credit, she's like, "Oh yeah, that was pretty racist." I was like, "Yeah, it was."
Yeah.
And then I haven't heard her say it again. I'm like, "Yes, grandma." Yeah. What kind of supports have you had throughout your various experiences we've talked about today? Were there like particular people or experiences where you felt supported or not supported?
Apart from your community, they're prevalent. It's super hot in this space, and it's because your community. I'm assuming your community's still here. But apart from your community support,
all the ancestors that pile into the room with me.
Yeah. Did I mention I'm claustrophobic?
That's a white term, not just.
It's like our people don't know space. They don't know personal space. They're like, what's that? What's that?
I can smell your armpits. That's how close you are to me. And if you're not that close to me, we're not family.
I'm happy with not being a family.
I love it.
You can be a distant cousin, dude.
Thank you.
But yes, support. Or what does support mean to you, and what does it look like to you?
Okay, that helps. I'm like, what does support mean to me? Being real with me. Like being as honest as people can all the time, or as beings can all the time. Like saying no to me is a really important form of support. Like telling me when they cannot do a thing. Because then that makes me believe when they say yes, you know? And...
Okay, that hurt.
And also, I guess when people take up the work on themselves to do it and don't expect me to do it for them. So like, because I'm in community spaces that are so mixed all the time, and I do feel like I'm really generous with what I am bringing through, and I'm trying to share it all the time with everyone regardless. And then you'll have folks of more privileged spaces kind of taking that all the time, but then not actually doing the work that that they are now laden with, right? The responsibility that you are given when you learn something, you're also given a responsibility now to do something with that knowledge, right?
Otherwise, what's the point in learning?
Yeah, so I think that's when I feel supported, is when I see people actually doing something with that knowledge in real time, and applying it or trying to, even if they're still messing up a bit, whatever. They're just trying. That's how I feel supported, because it takes the weight off of me to keep doing that. And then it's also really basic stuff like feeding me. Like Joe has fed me many times. Feeding me great food, always being down to go dancing or to just dance anywhere, anytime.
Do I need an excuse?
Yeah. Just laughing with me. Yeah, I think, and then just staying there. So like when you were in the ceremony, Joe, and you were like, I was really getting in that uncomfortable space or feeling all these things, but you stayed. Obviously not everyone can, that's all good. But for those that can, it shows, it creates something different for me too. It helps heal something for me. Because I am really used to doing things alone, quote unquote, or just not with visible support around me. And so seeing people stay there and be through that uncomfortable space with me, that's a huge show of support, to just be fully present with it, and not trying to do more or less, just being. Yeah, because those are, I purposefully agitate and create discomfort because we need to wake the fuck up. Like what's happening isn't okay. And so for me, it's just trying to really mix us out of it to then be in a space where we can receive or just notice that essence again, right? That we're always carrying from our ancestors. So that's going to be different for every person, right, in the space. So everyone's going to have a different experience of it. But, yeah, you just got to drop out of the default, you know.
What do you do specifically to stay like reminded that this is not okay, that what we see is not okay? Because I feel like I get the energy boost when I'm around other Indigenous folk who have already done the inner work as well as know what they're talking about, and I can relate to that. But in my own time, it's like I feel like I get so distracted with all the outside stuff that I forget to remind myself that this is not fucking okay. Me having to be on time to someone else's priorities and do all of these other things, or me working towards somebody else's goal or greater purpose is not okay. Do you know what I mean? Like me constantly uplifting somebody else's path, or me constantly always giving my power away to somebody else. And I'm like, I've learned to center myself and like, you know, to get into my own routine of my like reshaping my morning routine. But what do you do to constantly remind yourself? Because I feel like a lot of our people will not, well, a lot of our listeners might not actually have a routine, or might not have something to lay some sort of foundation. Yeah. So we can be awake kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, when you initially asked the question, like, what do you do to remind yourself it's not okay? I'm like, I don't need to do anything. All the stuff that's happening around me all the time, I'm like, that's not okay. That's not okay. That's not okay. Yeah. You know, everything does it all the time, reminds me.
Oh, but that's because you listen, though.
Well, and also, you know, when you're openly trans, you know what I mean? It's just, yeah, it turns up, it exposes everything, you know? It really exposes everything. So I really find it a blessing, that's for sure. I feel very blessed to be trans. I find it a huge privilege. Yeah, but what do I do maybe to like ground myself through that? Yeah, I'm definitely not any model of practice in any way. But when I do reach that point of breaking where you're like, fuck, what do I do to come back? Yeah, I sing. You know, I sit and I breathe and I sing, or I move, or I go to the waters and I move with the waters. I just have to shut the fuck up and listen. Because it's all coming through all the time.
Guilty.
But I'm too busy, you know, just doing everything else to distract and to not hear it, to not feel it. I cry a lot. I cry a lot. I'm trying to, get into practice of being with my voice though more. Because for me personally, I haven't been able to engage with my rage enough and the anger. That's the part that I was denied, my ancestors' rage. So I'm trying to figure out what's a practice of connecting with it in a way that's not going to destroy me or you know, or harm others around me, right? In a way that's, you know, I don't want. But yeah, so just, I guess that's kind of one of my practices, identifying what are the experiences or the feelings that I haven't been allowing myself to feel, because that's actually my ancestors' feelings too, and experiences. So letting myself go there, but you know, you need to kind of figure out support to keep you still on the side, right, in this plane. So trying not to do it alone. That's hard. Yeah, so I don't know if that really answered the question, but no, I think definitely creative practice, basically. I think that's, you know, creative practice, which is ritual, it is ceremony. That's all creative work. Yeah.
And I love that you talked about Moana, because I feel like we've already been there, just enjoyed Moana. And Moana's definitely a healer. All right, I know that we didn't jump into specific communities, but I feel like we talked our behinds off around all the different inequities that exist, and both in the physical and non-physical world. What is on the far queue for you though? What are topics that's like that you recognize that we're not talking about? They've been there with apart from everything that we've just said though, because I feel like everything that we just discussed in the last 45 minutes, a far queue conversation for sure. Yeah. But is there anything else that you would like to hear more conversations around?
Yeah, that is really hard. I was thinking about this question earlier, and I just immediately was thinking about all of the other voices that I feel like I've been conditioned to not hear, because I'm colonized human, still working it out, coming back to my ceremonies. So those voices being the voices of different waters and of different land forms, clouds, different wind forms, all of these, all of our animal relations, all of the trees and the different kinds of plants. I've been conditioned at least out of hearing them. I think when I was younger, I used to hear them a lot more. So to me, those are the voices that are like, I wish could be centered more. And often we're still centering them in ways that, still really center humans. And for me, it's really as simple as really just becoming quiet and hearing them, however they communicate, and then moving from there. So like, really listening to them even before we speak. So letting them speak first in some way, and then we speak. So I don't know, that came to mind for some reason.
Beautiful.
When I thought about that question before, and then, so I guess, yeah. And in that, just how, because I feel like those voices of elemental ancestors are what creates, to me, an Indigenous perspective and grounding. So that kind of threads then into how Indigenous voices are heard, and what it is to be Native or Indigenous. So I think that's a topic that I'm always grappling with is, just how do we honor all kinds of Native experiences, and that there's no one way to be Native or Indigenous, and even the knowledge that we're trying to reclaim, there's, it's not going to be any one way either, that's kind of the beauty and the pain of it, right? I guess just wanting folks to just listen a little bit like wider, coming out wider from, for those that don't already, I'm sure lots of people who maybe do. And then working in from there to seeing how that land and water is being honored in the spaces that they're in. Right. So, because I feel like when we do start with our original waters and lands in any space, like that job interview, even, I don't know, how would that shift? That's decolonizing the space, y'all. So
I don't even know how to like imagine a shift like that in a job interview. Like, and man, I'm like, I'll be looking forward to be surprised, because I'm like, I've never, I don't think an image has popped in my mind yet, and usually it does, and I'm like,
I mean, it's, but I feel like the more that we can just keep learning about, the original names of where we live and where we are, and just doing that work all the time, I think that's just such an important place to keep starting from. And don't just do it just don't do it in a performative way, a lip service way. I hate that, like, we acknowledge the da-da-da. I'm like, I don't need your fucking acknowledgement. Excuse me.
Yeah, what are you actually doing to help?
Just ask for permission to be here, be like, these are the lands of, and we ask for permission to speak right now, or to do this, or to share this, like keep acknowledging the relationship. Maybe that's what it is. So yeah. How does relationship move all the kinds of work you're doing?
Yeah.
Wow, that question. That question is life. That question, yes. Thank you for bringing that. Like, legit.
I'm gonna ponder that.
It's hard though, in in a really digital world right now. Like, what relationship means.
Is that why you're not on any digital social media platforms? This is me, because I'm such a freaking millennial. I'm like this. So what's your socials? Let's follow each other.
Yeah. If
and
people...
this is them. They're like this. No, I don't have. I have Instagram, but that's purely just to.
I don't even, I always forget about it.
Good.
I'm like, people send me these things. I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, I don't want to log in. I'm just like,
If people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
contact you and Joe first,
Yeah.
and then y'all send them,
Yeah, or
over
just
to me.
DM us
Perfect.
on
Yeah.
No, that's good.
I'm not on any social media. I just say that I'm internet lazy, but I just can't keep up.
No, that's
I'm
fine.
definitely an in-person person. So
We'll be your assistant.
Admin team.
it's through the relationship, right? They got to connect with y'all, and then you can suss them out and send them my way.
Yeah. What's your criteria?
Just oh my god, what's your type? Preferences?
Yeah. Maybe we'll find you a
Does
partner.
this fit though?
I know.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna
Right.
go there. I was just about to objectify you, but I'm like, let me not.
Good choice. Thank you so much for coming through. Like, we really do appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you. It helps recenter me and what the heck am I doing here? So
Yeah. It's
so
been great.
thank you for doing the work too of this podcast and bringing people together to share, and creating that relationship again. And I feel like, this work is so important. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I feel like, honestly, if I'm being 100% transparent, you only scratched the surface of what could and would be done in that space. Yeah. And I feel like maybe that's a safeguard as well, because, we can't just hear all of it at once and be like, do the work and da-da-da-da-da. So I feel like I really rely on what you said earlier in terms of not wanting to know all the knowledge, and not wanting to know all of that at once. And time will give that,
Well, yeah, and it's the challenge to learn. I mean, and if you take away the learning process, how are people going to, like if you just give someone the answer right away, then they don't, you deprive them of the learning process, which is actually where the answer lies.
And the experience of learning too.
And the growth, right?
Yeah. All of that. So.
Because I'm like, my biggest growths were my biggest failures. The hard I fell was will not be wearing those shoes again. But yes, join us for our little fuck you send off. The fuck you.
Fuck you. Fuck you.
The fuck you.
Fuck you. Fuck you.
Fuck you, everybody.
Fuck you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Can we have a dance?